A gentle girl who loved studying suddenly became pregnant, but her boyfriend abandoned her, forcing her to give birth to the child alone. Not long afterward, she unexpectedly married into a wealthy family and became a wealthy wife overnight. But when the truth was finally revealed, the ugliness of human nature was laid bare for all to see. The story begins 400 years ago, with a samurai named Kanaharu. After losing a battle, he fled all the way to Kuchinashi village. However, he never expected that he would be betrayed by the village chief. Before his death, Kanaharu placed a curse on the village chief and his descendants. Their family would forever be haunted by his vengeful spirit. Perhaps the curse really came true, because today, the descendants of that village chief, the Tatsumi family, have fallen into complete chaos. The head of the Tatsumi family, Kuranosuke Tatsumi, had recently passed away. After his death, his wife Shino received a threatening letter. A person calling himself the Headhunter Warrior claimed that before the end of the Samurai Festival, he would personally come and take the life of the next head of the Tatsumi family. No one knew who the Headhunter Warrior really was, but Shino refused to take any chances. She decided to invite her childhood friend, Inspector Isamu, to protect her family. The young detective Hajime and Miyuki also joined the trip. While heading toward the Tatsumi family's mansion, Hajime and the others saw a mysterious man wearing a mask standing at the top of the stone stairs near a shrine. Soon after, they arrived at the magnificent Tatsumi mansion. The servant Senda opened the wooden door and welcomed the guests inside. It turned out that Shino had recently been feeling unwell, so she asked Rintaro, the only doctor in the village, to examine her. After talking with everyone, Hajime learned about the current situation of the Tatsumi family. The family had now split into two opposing sides. One side consisted of the 3 children born to Kuranosuke Tatsumi's first wife. The other side was Shino, who married Kuranosuke 8 years ago, and her only son Saimaru. The root of all this conflict was a biased will left behind by Kuranosuke before his death. He should have passed the family business to his eldest son Ryanosuke, but instead, he gave everything to Saimaru, who had no blood relation to him. His father's favoritism made Ryanosuke furious. He had always held a deep grudge against this unfair decision. After everyone left, a maid reminded Shino to take her medicine, but at that moment, a figure dressed like an ancient samurai suddenly appeared behind the wooden door. He raised his sword with both hands and violently chopped through the door. Hajime heard the scream and immediately rushed over, but the mysterious figure had already disappeared. Hajime chased after him, but found nothing. After Shino calmed everyone down, Ryanosuke and Saimaru also arrived at the scene one after another. Ryanosuke believed that it might have simply been a villager who accidentally broke in. After all, the Samurai Festival was currently taking place in the village, and there were still 5 days left before it ended. But Hajime disagreed. He believed that an ordinary villager would never destroy the door like that. At the same time, Miyuki discovered footprints left by straw sandals on the floor. There were about 4 or 5 steps, and then they suddenly disappeared. Hajime suspected that the samurai had probably taken off his sandals and hidden somewhere inside the room, which meant the mysterious person might still be hiding somewhere in this mansion. At that moment, a man named Saburo came to visit. He was the same mysterious person Miyuki had seen at the shrine earlier. He was Shino's friend, and apparently wanted to stay at the mansion for a few days, since all the guest rooms were occupied. Saburo was placed in a room that looked almost like a sealed chamber. To reach this room, one had to pass through 2 doors. One was a hidden rotating door built into the wall, and the other was a heavy iron door. The next morning, while everyone was having breakfast, they became curious why Saburo still had not appeared. Shino stood up to check on him, but the moment she left, Ryanosuke expressed his anger. He believed that his father had only just died, yet his stepmother had already brought a strange man into the house. He thought it was completely unacceptable. Saimaru defended his mother, and the two immediately started arguing. The furious Ryanosuke even grabbed a hunting rifle nearby and pointed it at Saimaru, almost pulling the trigger. At that critical moment, Shino arrived in time and snatched the rifle away. The terrifying look in Shino's eyes shocked everyone. Ryanosuke seemed intimidated and quickly claimed that he was only joking. After this incident, Hajime received a phone call from Saburo. Saburo told him that if Hajime wanted to know the truth about the Headhunter Warrior, he should come to his room together with Shino at midnight. At midnight, Hajime arrived in front of the iron door, but suddenly, a cry for help came from inside the room. Hajime tried to open the door, but it seemed to be locked from the inside. Shino immediately took Hajime to search for the key. Hajime opened the door, but what he saw inside shocked him. A headless corpse was lying on the floor. Saburo was dead, and the murderer had disappeared without a trace. The iron door could not be opened from the outside. It could only be unlocked with a key from inside. This was a classic locked room murder case. After returning to the crime scene for further investigation, Hajime discovered that the room had two possible exits: the iron door and a window facing outside. The window was protected by iron bars, although one of the bars in the middle could be removed. There was a cliff directly outside. Anyone who climbed out would surely fall to their death. Besides, the gap between the two bars was only wide enough for a woman or a child to pass through. An ordinary adult man could never fit through it. While checking Saburo's belongings, Shino suddenly revealed that the money she had given him was missing. It turned out that Saburo had previously approached Shino and claimed that he was actually her son, Saimaru's twin brother. However, after Shino gave birth to two sons, the hospital told her that one of them had died, but Saburo insisted that he had actually survived. He said he had been severely burned in a fire back then, and had only returned now to reunite with his mother. Shino herself was unsure whether he was telling the truth, but because Saimaru was about to inherit the family position, she feared causing trouble, so she gave Saburo a large amount of money to keep quiet. However, the strange thing was, that money was nowhere to be found among Saburo's belongings. After hearing this, Ryunosuke sarcastically suggested that Saimaru was the murderer, because he had heard that Saimaru left the house with the servant Senda that morning, yet Senda was currently in the yard trimming branches. Naturally, everyone doubted Ryunosuke's accusation, but Senda confirmed that Saimaru had indeed gone out. The only difference was, Saimaru had left alone. That night, Moegi, the eldest daughter of the Tatsumi family, took Hajime and Miyuki for a walk around the village. Amid the thick fog, they encountered villagers dressed as samurai marching in formation. During the confusion, Miyuki was knocked down by someone and became separated from Hajime. While Miyuki was alone and complaining about her bad luck, the headhunter warrior suddenly appeared behind her. After realizing Miyuki had disappeared, Hajime immediately began searching for her. Sure enough, near the shrine, he spotted the figure of a samurai. The person in his arms was none other than Miyuki. The samurai entered a nearby cave, and Hajime followed closely behind. But after taking only a few steps, something struck Hajime from behind, and he collapsed unconscious. When he woke up again, a samurai was sitting there with a terrifying presence. The samurai slowly opened the package beneath his feet. Inside was Saimaru's severed head. The samurai claimed, "I am Kanaharu, the warrior from 400 years ago. I have returned for revenge." After saying this, he stood up and raised his sword toward Hajime. When Hajime regained consciousness again, he discovered that he and Miyuki had already returned to the Tatsumi mansion. It turned out that Dr. Rintaro had found them inside the cave. Apparently, the samurai never intended to kill them. After learning that Saimaru had been murdered, Shino covered her face and cried, but beside her, Moegi revealed a strange smile. Hajime stared at the wind chime gently swaying in the breeze, and a question suddenly appeared in his mind. If the headhunter warrior truly wanted revenge against the Tatsumi family, then why would he kidnap Miyuki, someone completely unrelated to the Tatsumi family? At the same time, Inspector Isamu gathered everyone together and announced that the case had been solved. Earlier, he had discovered a damaged spot on a tree trunk across from the crime scene. From this, he concluded that the murderer had prepared a rope bridge between the locked room and the tree on the opposite side. After committing the murder, the killer escaped across the rope bridge. Therefore, Isamu believed the murderer was the servant Senda, because he had practiced acrobatics and bone-shrinking techniques 10 years earlier. At that moment, a maid suddenly rushed in and reported that the hunting rifle in the living room had disappeared. Everyone immediately went out to search for Senda. Suddenly, a gunshot echoed through the area. Senda was found dead nearby. He had been killed when the hunting rifle accidentally fired. It turned out that many years ago, someone had filled the barrel of that rifle with lead. Everyone in the family knew about this secret. The only person unaware of it was Senda, who had only recently joined the Tatsumi household. Among Senda's belongings, the police also discovered a dagger engraved with Kanaharu's family crest. The police initially concluded that Senda was a descendant of Kanaharu. He had come to the Tatsumi family mansion for revenge, he murdered Saburo and Saimaru in order to create conflict and destroy the Tatsumi family from within. This explanation sounded completely reasonable. Ryunosuke was extremely satisfied with the result. He announced that since the case had been solved, everyone should leave his house. The next day, Hajime and the others boarded the bus home, but deep inside, Hajime knew the case was not truly over. He decided that he had to return to the village and uncover the real culprit. After getting off the bus, they arrived at a nearby hotel. As Hajime walked through the hotel's revolving door, a black cat suddenly passed by him. At that very moment, Hajime stopped moving. He finally understood everything. Meanwhile, on the other side, Ryunosuke successfully became the new head of the Tatsumi family. But at that moment, a cup of poison tea that had been prepared beforehand was brought out. Everyone else was drinking alcohol. Only Shino picked up the teacup. Just as she was about to drink the poison, Hajime suddenly rushed into the room. He began his final deduction. Hajime pointed out that Inspector Isamu's reasoning had one major flaw. According to the police investigation, Senda had fallen from a great height during a tightrope performance 10 years ago. And ever since then, he had suffered from a severe fear of heights, so there was no way he could have escaped from that cliff using a rope. Think back to the scene where Senda was trimming the tree branches. He could have easily stood at the top of the ladder and used small scissors. But instead, he deliberately stayed at the bottom and used heavy, long-handled scissors. That was a clear sign of his fear of heights. And it was the flaw the real killer failed to anticipate. The marks left on the tree across the cliff were nothing more than a fake clue created to mislead everyone. However, Senda was not innocent either. He was simply used by the real killer and then abandoned. In reality, this murder was carried out by two people working together. Hajime brought up what happened when he was attacked inside the cave. He clearly saw the samurai enter the cave first. But when he followed him inside, he was suddenly knocked unconscious from behind. The passage inside the cave was extremely narrow, which meant the attacker could not possibly have moved around him and appeared behind him. This proved that the person who knocked him out was someone else. Then Hajime revealed the truth behind Senda's death. The fact that the shotgun barrel had been filled with lead was something the real killer already knew. So the killer forced Senda into a situation where he appeared to commit suicide out of guilt. This perfectly benefited the real murderer. It eliminated their accomplice while also deceiving the police. At that moment, Ryunosuke raised a question. If the killer was trying to take over the family inheritance, then killing Saimaru would have been enough. Why go through the trouble of killing Saburo as well? But Hajime immediately replied that Saburo never truly existed. He was a completely fabricated identity created by Senda and the real killer. The first time Saburo appeared, it was Senda wearing that identity. Before that, Senda had also played the role of the headhunter warrior. After the headhunter warrior disappeared, Saburo appeared immediately afterward. The brilliance of this trick was that later, the real killer personally disguised themselves as Saburo and acted together with Senda. This completely cleared Senda of suspicion, making Saburo seem like a real person who had existed all along. It was a carefully planned murder performance where two people played three different roles, and the headless body found inside the locked room was not Saburo at all. It was actually Saimaru. Why did the killer cut off Saburo's head? Because they needed to make sure no one could identify the body. Then why did the killer attack Miyuki but leave her alive? Because they wanted her to witness the severed head with her own eyes, making everyone believe that Saimaru had truly been killed somewhere else. Since Saburo had already been established as a real person, no one would ever connect Saimaru's head with Saburo's body. In this way, one corpse was disguised as two separate murders. Isamu interrupted Hajime. The autopsy showed that the body had AB blood type, but Shino has type O blood. A mother with type O blood cannot give birth to a child with type AB blood. So how can you claim that the body was Saimaru? Hajime calmly answered, because Saimaru was never Shino's biological son, and the real killer is Shino. Remember the moment when she took the shotgun away from Ryunosuke? She clearly knew the gun barrel had been filled with lead. So why did she act so frightened? Because Ryunosuke was her real son. If that gun had actually fired, the person who would have died was Ryunosuke, and Senda was Ryunosuke's biological father. Shino and Senda joined forces to kill Saimaru, all to clear the path for their own son. The blood type was the only evidence proving that Saimaru was not her child. So she had to hide the truth at all costs. No one would believe that a mother would kill her own child, unless the child was never her real son. To hide the truth, she created the identity of Saburo, allowing Saimaru's headless body to die under the name of Saburo. This way, the police would never discover the truth through identification, and they would even help remove the body for her. Then she used Miyuki as a third-party witness, making everyone believe that Saimaru had been killed somewhere else. In the end, Shino admitted all of her crimes and revealed the entire truth. But there was another reason why she killed Saimaru, because Saimaru was the biological son of Kuranosuke Tatsumi's first wife, Ayako. Shino had always hated Ayako. She was born into a poor family, and in order to change her fate, Shino studied desperately, but her classmate Ayako, who came from a wealthy family, constantly bullied her because of her privilege. Later, Shino was forced to leave home and work to survive. After accidentally becoming pregnant, she was abandoned by Senda. At the maternity hospital, she met Ayako again. At that time, Ayako had already married into a wealthy family and was living a glamorous life. The overwhelming sense of injustice drove Shino to make a horrifying decision. She secretly switched her own baby with Ayako's baby. Those two children were Ryanosuke and Saimaru. Later, because Shino desperately missed her own child, she came to the Tatsumi family as a maid just to stay close to Ryanosuke. She then used every possible method to seduce Kuranosuke Tatsumi, and eventually became his second wife. But even after all that, for 18 years, whenever she looked at Saimaru, she could always see Ayako's shadow in him. It became a nightmare that haunted her every single day. In the end, Shino killed her own adopted son with tears in her eyes. At this point, the entire truth behind the case had finally been revealed, but there was still one final mystery left. How did Senda escape from the locked room? Hajime explained that there were actually two keys to open the room. One was the real key, and the other was a fake key. The fake key was hanging on the wall, while the real key had always been in Senda's possession. When Hajime and Shino arrived at the door, Saimaru had already been killed. Inside the room, Senda was pretending to be Saburo and calling for help. When Hajime and Shino went to look for the key, Senda quietly left the room and locked the door from the outside. Then, at the exact moment Hajime entered through the rotating door, Senda slipped out through the opposite side. Senda moved to the other side of the wall, handed the real key to Shino, and immediately escaped. Shino then gave the key to Hajime, allowing him to open the door. That was the only way to avoid arousing Hajime's suspicion. After the truth was revealed, Shino let out a long sigh. Everything is over. As she said those words, she picked up the cup of tea in front of her. Seeing this, Ryanosuke rushed forward to stop his mother from drinking the poison tea, but it was already too late. At that moment, his younger brother Hayato spoke up. Ryanosuke tried to poison him back then and kill him. That was why he had no choice but to pretend to be useless and weak, just to survive. He never thought Ryanosuke would use the same method again today. As Shino coughed up blood, she endured the pain and whispered, the poison was something she put in herself. She was trying to kill herself. This tragic woman protected her son until the very end of her life.